All right, let's get into a wild one. We're talking about a family feud, a promise made in a courtroom, and a legal fight that went all the way to the top. And it all kicks off with one very, very big number. 5 million new Taiwan dollars. That, right there, was the penalty for breaking a promise. And when you see a number like that, it really makes you wonder.
I mean, seriously, can a deal, especially one between family, really be that ironclad? Can it hold up in court? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack in this explainer.
So, this whole mess didn't actually start with a fight. It started with an attempt to end all the fighting. You see, back in 2014, this family signed a settlement agreement, a contract that was supposed to buy them permanent peace.
And wow, the contrast here is just night and day, isn't it? On one side, you have this solemn guarantee, I will never sue you again. And on the other, he does exactly that, files a whole new round of lawsuits. The promise was broken, plain and simple, which should have triggered that multi-million-dollar penalty. But you have to ask, why on earth was a promise this extreme needed in the first place?
Well, it turns out this agreement wasn't just built on hope, it was built on a history of deep, deep mistrust, and it all goes back to an earlier, pretty shocking betrayal.
Okay, so here's the backstory. After their mother passed away, the siblings found out their brother had actually forged her signature to make himself the sole beneficiary on some life insurance policies. He was convicted of forgery, and this settlement, he signed it while appealing his criminal case. So you see, this wasn't just a friendly agreement, it was a trade-off. He signs the deal and promises to stop suing them, and in return he gets a much lighter, suspended sentence.
So that $5 million penalty, it wasn't just some random number they pulled out of a hat. It was designed to be a weapon, a deterrent, so powerful that the fighting would have to stop, for good. It was literally the price of peace. But the law had a few things to say about that. So after the brother broke his promise, his siblings took him to court to collect that penalty. And this is where the story turns into a total legal roller coaster. The case went through 3 different courts in Taiwan, and believe me, each one had a different take on it.
You can really see how the thinking evolved here. First, the district court kept it simple. Hey, a deal's a deal, pay the man. But then the high court gets involved and starts to complicate things, saying, well, hold on, only part of this promise is legit. And then the Supreme Court takes it one giant step further, asking, okay, the valid part was broken, but is the punishment fair? So what was going on here? What were they arguing about?
This case essentially became this epic legal tug-of-war between 2 really fundamental ideas: our freedom to make our own deals and the court's power to step in when a deal just doesn't seem right.
So, on one end of the rope, you have this big principle, freedom of contract. The idea is simple. If 2 adults agree to something, the court should respect that and enforce it. A promise is a promise. And that was the logic the first court used.
But on the other end, you have this powerful counter-idea, judicial fairness. This gives courts the right to look at a deal and say, whoa, hold on a second, this is just way too much or it goes against the public good. And this is where the higher court started to pull the case in a new direction.
Okay, so the high court did something really clever. They essentially took a legal knife and sliced that original promise right in half. They said, you cannot make a deal promising not to report a crime. That's a no-go, because justice is the state's business, not a private bargaining chip. But promising not to file a civil suit, that's a personal right, and you absolutely can agree to give that up. So the brother broke the valid part of the promise. The Supreme Court agreed with all that, but they weren't done yet.
And this quote right here, this is the key the Supreme Court used to unlock the next level of the problem. They pointed to a specific part of the law, Article 252, that basically gives judges the power to cut down penalties that are way too high. They argued that even in a weird, one-of-a-kind deal like this, the idea of fairness still has to apply.
So with this new focus on what's reasonable, the Supreme Court didn't just end the case. Nope, they kicked it back down to the High Court with some very specific homework to do. Now let's be super clear about this. This was not a win for the brother who broke the deal. He was still on the hook. The question was no longer if he had to pay, but exactly how much was fair. The Supreme Court's order was basically this: don't just look at the contract and stamp it approved. I want you to go back, look at the actual damage done to each individual person, and then figure out if the penalty fits the crime.
And this table really breaks down just how detailed they got. For the brothers' family, yeah, they got hit with a civil suit. That was a clear breach of the valid part of the promise. So for them, the question is $2 million a fair price for that headache? But look at the sister's case. She was only targeted in the criminal complaint, which was the part of the promise the court said was void anyway. The valid part of the deal was never broken against her. So the Supreme Court asks, should she really get millions for a promise that wasn't technically broken in her case? It's a much harder question.
So when you zoom out, what this whole messy family saga shows us is this constant push and pull at the heart of the law. It's a balancing act, right? Between what a contract literally says and what a judge thinks is fundamentally fair.
And that leaves us with this huge, thought-provoking question to chew on. Where do you draw the line? Should courts have the power to step in and save people from their own bad deals? At what point does that stop being fairness and start undermining the whole idea of a binding promise? It's a question with no easy answer, and one that courts and families are going to keep wrestling with for a long, long time.